Good day, everyone. This is Mark Bello, and you're listening to Headline News. Cruz. Congress has an obligation to protect the integrity of the democratic system. On January 6th, the U.S. Congress will hold a joint session to count and certify the results of each state's electoral college vote. Both the House and Senate currently have a number of Republican lawmakers who have made it clear that they will challenge the electoral votes in the session. Senator Ted Cruz, the lead challenger, said on Sunday, January 3rd, that we have an obligation to the voters, and we have an obligation to the Constitution to ensure that this election was lawful. On January 2nd, 11 Republican U.S. senators, led by Ted Cruz, also announced that they would challenge the electoral vote. And on January 3rd, Cruz told Fox Business News that Congress has a responsibility to address election issues and protect the integrity of the democratic system. He said the challenge to the electoral vote is intended to force the appointment of an emergency electoral commission, which would perform an emergency audit of the election results, so as to assess these claims of fraud. Cruz reiterated the Trump team's call for the Supreme Court and state legislatures to overturn election results in key swing states, as many Americans believe the results of the November 3rd election are not credible. He said, "We can do it in 10 days before the inauguration. I think that it would take major steps towards reestablishing trust in our democratic process." But some Democrats viewed the action of challenging the electoral vote as treason and hoped to put Cruz under arrest. In response, Cruz said, "Yesterday, when I released my statement with 10 other senators, I'd had multiple Democrats urging that I should be arrested and tried for the crimes of sedition and treason. Well, listen, I think everyone needs to calm down. I think we need to tone down the rhetoric. This is already a volatile situation. It's like a tinderbox, and we're throwing lit matches into it. I wish the Supreme Court had taken this case. There were 2 opportunities to take, one out of Pennsylvania, one out of Texas. I wish the court had taken one or both of those cases. I think the Supreme Court would be a better forum for resolving those issues. Unfortunately, though, the court declined to take those 2 cases. Cruz believed that while challenging the election results is not ideal for Congress, in his opinion, it is better than accepting an election result that a large number of voters are questioning. He believed that ignoring the numerous allegations of fraud is a real attack on the American democratic system. We ought to have a serious, fair process and tribunal to consider these claims. Consider them quickly, and consider them expeditiously. We can do it in 10 days before the inauguration." Cruz also referred to a Reuters/Ipsos poll released on November 18th, showing that 39% of Americans believe the election was rigged. By party, 68% of Republicans, 16% of Democrats, and 31% of independents believed the election was rigged. As a result, Cruz stressed the importance of rebuilding the American electorate's trust in the American democratic process. He said, "I believe that should be a bipartisan objective. We may be too divided today for that to happen, but Democrats should be interested in Americans having confidence in our electoral system, just as much as Republicans should be." On Sunday, 10 members of the Senate from both parties voiced their opposition to the actions of Cruz and others challenging the election results. The senators include Senator Republican leader Mitch McConnell, Republican Whip John Thune, Senate Republican Policy Committee Chair Roy Blunt, and the notoriously anti-Trump Republican Senator Mitt Romney. Biden plans virtual presidential inauguration and dismantles parade reviewing stand. Joe Biden's team said last Sunday, on January 3rd, that their planned inauguration would include a virtual national parade online and canceled the actual inauguration parade. The Democratic presidential candidate, Joe Biden, will still review the readiness of military troops by the Capitol, however. According to the Associated Press, in recent days, workers had begun dismantling the inaugural parade reviewing stand in front of the White House. The Biden transition team, meanwhile, continues to prepare for a virtual celebration online. Organizers also said they will hold the virtual parade across the country to celebrate America's heroes, highlight Americans from all walks of life in different states and regions, and reflect on the diversity, heritage, and resilience of the country as we begin a new American era. The march will be broadcast live and will feature performances in communities across the country, the inaugural committee said. Participants will be announced in the coming weeks. Maju Varghese, Presidential Inaugural Committee Executive Director, said in a statement, "We are excited about the possibilities and opportunities this moment presents to allow all Americans to participate in our country's sacred inaugural traditions." If Biden takes the oath of office on the west side of the Capitol on January 20th, Biden and his wife, Jill, will then join Harris and her husband in a socially segregated review of the military directly across the street from the Capitol. The military parade is considered a tradition, with each president reviewing the readiness of the military. Biden will also be escorted from 15th Street in Washington to the White House by the traditional presidential escort, with representatives from all branches of the military. The inaugural committee said this will also be done at a social distance, providing the American people and world with historic images of the president-elect proceeding to the White House without attracting large crowds. Earlier in the day, the right-wing U.S. media outlet, the Gateway Pundit, said there was news that Biden had canceled the inauguration parade. The paper argued that the cancellation would have prevented it from turning into a parade of Trump supporters. The outcome of the 2020 U.S. election remains in the air. President Trump and his supporters have repeatedly presented the facts and evidence of election fraud to the public and have launched multiple lawsuits in multiple courts. And at least a dozen Republican senators and hundreds of House members believe massive election fraud does exist and will challenge the results in a joint session of Congress on January 6th. U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor says the most credible theory about the origin of coronavirus escaped from a Wuhan laboratory in China. In a recent video conference with several UK MPs, it was suggested that the Wuhan laboratory may be the most credible source of the coronavirus, also known as CCP virus. The latest information also suggests that the new coronavirus should have come from the top-secret Wuhan Institute of Virology, located 11 miles from the Wuhan market. According to the Daily Mail, Matthew Pottinger, a China expert in the White House who speaks fluent Mandarin, talked in a Zoom meeting openly last week, saying, "There is a growing body of evidence that the lab is likely the most credible source of the virus." He claimed the pathogen may have escaped through a leak or an accident, adding, "Even establishment figures in Beijing have openly dismissed the wet market story." Pottinger further stressed that even CCP leaders are now openly admitting the claims that the coronavirus originating from the Wuhan seafood market are false. The former Tory party leader, Ian Duncan Smith, who attended the meeting, said Mr. Pottinger's comments represented a stiffening of the U.S. position that the new coronavirus came from a leak at the laboratory, and that the U.S. is believed to be talking to a whistleblower from the Wuhan Institute. "I was told the U.S. has an ex-scientist from the laboratory in America at the moment," he said. That was what he heard a few weeks ago. He added that Beijing's refusal to allow journalists to visit the laboratory only served to increase suspicion that it was ground zero for the pandemic. The truth is, there are people who have been in those labs who maintain that this is the case, he said. They may well have been fiddling with bat coronaviruses, and in looking at them, they made a mistake. Sam Armstrong, communications director at the Henry Jackson Society Foreign Policy think tank, said, with such a senior and respected intelligence official speaking in support of this claim, the time has come for the British government to seek both answers about and compensation for COVID-19. According to the report, a group of experts from the WHO was preparing to fly to Wuhan to investigate how the CCP virus pandemic began. But the trip did not include the Wuhan Institute. Some critics fear that the investigation may end up being a cover-up, given the influence of the CCP on the WHO. Mr. Pottinger is one of the White House officials who warned of the origin of CCP virus in January 2020. His older brother, Paul, is a virologist at the University of Washington. Since the outbreak, he strongly suspected that the virus originated in the Wuhan laboratory, and in April 2020, he ordered U.S. intelligence agencies to look for evidence of this. This concludes today's broadcast. Thank you for your time, and stay tuned for the next headline news.